Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Punch, Kick, Choke, Chat. My name is Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts. We're here 8:30 Toronto time. I'm so excited to be at my house and home and coming to you from there. And tonight we're chatting with Sensei Heiko Rommelmann Jr. And I want to start out of the gate with a question that I'm pretty excited about. We're going to end up talking to everybody about it because when I was looking up your stuff today, there was a word that kept jumping out. Kata, 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 kata. But what's interesting, and I'm going to quote a little from something that Sensei Dofan will probably get to, but co-developer of ground defensive tactics for the Rochester police units for over 10 years. A lot of times when people get real world or when people go, no, it's, we need applications for the street, they actually move away from kata. And you seem to move more towards kata the more you actually have to put hands on or at least teach other people how to. Talk to us about that.
Well, I believe that good technique is what makes us all martial artists. But good technique is what you need for self-defense. And if the way to practice good technique is through kata, whether it's if you think of uchikomis are kata, practicing the same technique over and over again. That's kata. It's just not formalized. It just happens to be that I got into judo kata, which is formalized.
Mm-hmm. And, you hear a lot of guys, especially guys on the internet, like who just want to be like, hey, if I get a hold of you or if I see red, I don't care how much stuff you've done in the dojo. But again, you're training people who are almost exclusively dealing with people seeing red. Yeah. And so can you talk to us a bit about the practical application of a classical martial art for people who are dealing with that?
So what we did for the Rochester Police Department was I went in with two of the people that were developing the program. And they told me, hey, we need something that needs to be simple enough for anybody to use, but it has to be practical at the same time. And they wanted, I was told exactly what they wanted. They wanted something where the person was on the ground and being mounted, a position where the person was on the ground and the assailant was in their guard. They wanted something where they were on their stomach and the person was on their back. And they wanted something where the person was standing and coming in on them. And basically, I drew from a number of techniques that I had used over the years. And some of them, sometimes I came to the board and it was stuff that they were like, nope, can't use that at all. And other times they were like, yes, this is perfect. What was interesting for me was that when we developed it, I don't know anything about guns. I don't know about carrying them, anything. And every time we would come up with a technique, they had to be like, now remember, you have a holster with the gun right at your side. And so they kept bringing that up. And so it made it a little tougher for me. But, we did come up with, I think it was a final of 6 techniques. It was either 6 or 8. And they went to the board with it. And the Rochester Police Department ended up using it for about 10 years. And usually, if I understand correctly, about every 10 years, they turn over and they make a new system. And
sure.
So they used it for about 10 years, and it was really nice.
Were some of the problems that the moves were like chokes, lethal, that kind of idea?
No,
do that to a citizen until
most of the techniques that I did were all trying to control the person and get back on top so that you could it was arresting techniques to handcuff. I didn't do any chokes when we did it. Right. They were all just to get back on top and be on top of the person.
So let me ask you this: when you go to something like practical like that, we'll call it, coming from something that you're practicing in a gym or a dojo, did you find it actually looped you back to a time when this was needed more for street fighting in a way, or am I making that up?
Well, I mean, a lot of my training, I started off with jujitsu. So, and I really, I liked playing judo, but really I did jujitsu all the time. And it was always, the type of jujitsu that I did was always self-defense, always the person's attacking you. The person has a knife, the person has a stick, a club, he's going to punch you, he's going to kick you. And so, I mean, really, it brought back memories of that, because at the time that I was doing this, I was already doing a lot more judo than jujitsu at this time.
Right on. We love kata around here, so we are going to go around the horn on this little. I'm going to start with you, Sensei Suino, to talk about the self-defense type of kata that I know you do in your Japanese jiu-jitsu, and also just fundamentally like where you think kata fits into practical application.
I have two ideas about that I'd like to share. One is basically the idea that Hanchi always talks about. You can do things in kata that you can't do in real life without going to jail. And it's not that you're vicious, but you want to be able to practice these techniques. Kata always seemed to me like the secret crypt where all the ancient secrets are kept, and you can practice things in kata that you might not be able to practice in regular setting. But the other thing for me that I tell my students is that kata is the place where you can experience what it's like to be really, really good at a technique before you're actually that good. Right? Because it's idealized. Like in judo kata, you have somebody, your aite or uke is moving in such a way to really give you clear geometry and timing and understanding. And so if you have a good enough person doing that for you, you feel amazing. And so now you know what to reference, right? When you go into randori, you do free practice, you go, okay, a couple hours ago I was doing kata and it was amazing. I felt weightless, right? I used no effort. My partner was flying off of me. That's what I'm going to seek now. And what did I learn in kata that I can then employ in randori and judo, right? Or sparring and karate. So to me, those two things kind of have an interplay that make it interesting and I think really important.
Well, I love you. Yeah.
Also interesting about that is that in judo, nage no kata and katame no kata together are called randori no kata. So that's exactly what you're talking about.
Well, it's funny, Sensei. When I lived in Tokyo, my training partner, John Gage, and I used to do kata every Saturday for 3 or 4 hours in addition to classes and everything else. And I would say, quite to my own astonishment, I was better at randori when I practiced kata that much than I've ever been, right? I don't know why, but somehow, right? It makes you better. Yep.
I actually said that my fighting actually I was already a fighter at that when I started really studying kata. I had already fought in a lot of tournaments and fought on the US Jiu-Jitsu team. But once we started really studying kata was when I really started noticing that I was doing a lot better at tournaments.
And what's it shouldn't be a surprise, I guess, to anybody, but I've got a few students that really get into nage ura no waza, right? Counters to nage no kata.
Yeah.
And they get into ju no kata. And those guys, if they're practicing that for a demonstration or a test, for 6 or 9 months, their fighting is sick, right? Like they're doing stuff that nobody else is doing because there's stuff in those kata that you don't do anywhere else. It's kind of amazing. Yeah.
Break that open a little more for us, because we do tend to talk to a lot of strikers on the show and we do have a lot of grapplers in, but for us stand-up karate folks, like there is one-step sparring where you're working with an uke and you do your bunkai, but when I go to the park and do kata, it's me alone, and you're talking about 2-person kata. So can you break that down just a little more for us so the listener who's dumb like me can get it?
So nage no kata is forms of throwing. There's 15 throws. There are 5 sets of 3, and it demonstrates hand technique, hip technique, leg techniques, rear sacrifice throws, and side sacrifice throws. And so obviously you're practicing with a partner. So one person is tori and one person is uke. And then katame no kata is again 15 techniques. There's 5 techniques in each set, and it's hold downs, chokes, and arm locks.
Right on. Thanks for that. Let me jump over to you, Sensei Dauphin, you know, talking about just the applications of kata towards a real world thing, actually bringing us back to a time when these might have been used differently.
Sean, maybe go to Sensei Legacy first, because I feel like he and I are going to say a lot of similar things. So maybe let Sensei Legacy have the first word on that.
Awesome, Sensei Dauphin. Hanchi Legacy?
Well, in kata, from the karate viewpoint of it, in kata, you learn proper application, how to use your body to get the best results. That's why you do it over and over and over again. And bunkai is in the kata, which prepares you for situations all the time in your mind. And in kata, you can experience, pardon me for saying this, but really you can experience killing. So that, like a police officer, you know, he practices shooting all the time. You practice in peacetime, right? To be able to be ready for wartime. So the exercise there is that you become accustomed to it or familiar with it. So if a police officer shoots somebody that he has to, you know, he'll be able to keep a calm mind because his job may not yet be done. So kata instills and discovers a lot of things and makes you experience a lot of things that you do it in your mind, and then when it comes on the street, you're calm because you've done it before. And I know that's the real dark side of things, but when police officers are confronted with people with guns, knives, or multiple persons, they have to not panic at that time. They have to be able to have good control of themselves. So kata is self-discovery.
Thanks, Hanchi. Sensei Dauphin, anything you want to add or expand on?
Oh yeah, for sure. I have a couple of thoughts I want to share. One won't surprise anybody. How you do anything is how you do everything. If you do your katas really well, you probably do your fighting really well. You probably do your basics really well. You're probably in good shape. The other thing I would say, you know, kata is kumite. Basics is kata. Basics is like, they're all related. You can't have one without the other. It's not, otherwise you're just, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody, you're not a martial artist. You're a combat athlete, right? If all you do is fight, you're just a combat athlete. You have to have kata. And I think kata gives you body, mind, and spirit, the full being, right? Like everything. In karate, I don't want to talk about judo because I don't know it well, but in karate, people should think about the katas that were invented after the Meiji Restoration and the katas that were invented before the Meiji Restoration, because there were much different reasons why they invented those katas, right? Like if you're talking about a kata like Kankudai, Seiyunshin, Pasai, that's before the Meiji Restoration, and they had an actual purpose, right? Like you were doing those katas for an actual purpose, and it was to be able to defend yourself. After, when you get into things like the Pinyin katas, when Itosu was taking it into the school system, I'm not saying you can't defend yourself with those katas, but the primary purpose was about good technique, physical fitness. You know, that's where we were going with things. On the practical side, Sean, you know, I say there's no rules of engagement in kata. When you do Jiu Kumite in the dojo, we agree to certain things. Okay, we're not going to kick each other in the balls. We're not going to eye gouge each other. We're not going to do these things. But when you do those older style katas and you do them properly, there's no rules of engagement. There's no, so, and one of the things, at least when I do kata, which another great thing about kata is people can do it with different mindsets. I like that kata closes and finishes. It does, the gap never opens again. Like you close the gap, you do your techniques, whether that's an elbow, like whatever it is, and then it's done. It doesn't, like not in Jiu Kumite where you do a couple things and then you move away again. In real life, that doesn't happen. If we ask Sensei Legacy or people who've been in real scrapes, they're going to say, yeah, nobody took a step back, put their hands up to their chins and started fighting again. No, they got in there and they did the technique until somebody was not fighting anymore. And I think kata teaches you how to do something until the other person's not fighting anymore.
Right on. I just want to add one little idea for me where I think about kata, you know, really like year one of karate, I heard martial arts is here to change you. You're not here to change it. And I think about that because if we're sparring and I'm tired, I can back out and take a moment. Or if we're grappling and I'm feeling tough, I can kind of pause. But a kata says, no, you move now, you do it this way, and this is your sequence, go. And I talk to my students about that all the time, like training solo kata in the park for an hour, I actually find tougher than rolling jiu-jitsu for an hour or sparring for an hour, because I can't take pauses where the kata doesn't let me pause. So it changes me, I don't change it. And I love that about it.
John, before you move on, John, I just want to say, kata shouldn't just be primarily a solo activity. It's in any martial art. It shouldn't be just you alone doing something. It needs to be applied to another human being. Even in Legacy Shura and Ryu, since Legacy touched on it, we have bunkai. So right. you have to have that. Otherwise, it's not as useful.
Thanks, Sensei.
Also an interesting point of what you're saying is that it's not just, you know, a lot of people think it's just controlling your body, but you're controlling your mind at the same time. And right down to even you're controlling your breathing. And a lot of that's very important. I mean, you know, if you think about it, that whole kata, you make it through and you control the points where you're breathing. I mean, you got to throw somebody for Nage no kata, you have to throw 15 times, you know, or 15 throws, and it's 15 right and 15 left. So you're doing 30 throws to get through those throws. That takes a lot of self-control, a lot of mind. You have to be on point with what you're doing, control your body, control your breathing just to get through it. So it's not just about, you know, what you see, the physical of what you see.
Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, I'm Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts. If you're here watching on YouTube, if you're watching live or later, please subscribe, hit that like button. We're so happy you're here and we love your word of mouth. If you're listening on your podcast while you're driving or baking for the weekend, we got a long weekend. We hope you're enjoying right now. But if you're here with us in real time on the Zoom meeting, we're so happy because we actually have a chat button at the bottom of the screen, and we want you to ask your questions for Sensei Rommelmann. And the button will be lit up there in a sec because you're part of this living history that we're creating with Punch, Kick, Choke, Chat as we move into our second 100 episodes, which I love saying every time. I'm here with my senseis, Sensei Randy Dauphin, Sensei Nicolas Suino, and Hanshi Gary Legacy. And, you know, I don't want to make any of this about me, but I'm newer at a certain grappling art. And so I decided to do 31 classes in 31 days. I finished that today. And what I want to say about my senseis is that I love that that's not that big a deal to them. Like, I love that they're happy for me. And I love that they know I achieved a goal and it's physically challenging, but they've done that times 10. And that's why they're my teachers, because they're not like, what? Wow. They're like, yeah, good for you. What are you doing tomorrow? And I love that. And I just want to say that because without the motivation of teachers who work as hard, if not much harder than I do, it'd be real easy to not understand why I'm following. But every single day, I know why they're my teachers. And I just want to say thanks for that. I want to throw it over to you, Sensei Dauphin.
All right. Get to do the introduction. So, Sensei Rommelmann Jr., Heiko Rommelmann Jr. has been studying martial arts for over 30 years. He has a 6th degree black belt in judo and also a Godan in jiu-jitsu, a Shodan in Toide, and a Shodan in Shingi Tai jujitsu. As well, he's also studied Aiki-jujitsu, Iaido, Kobudo, Tai-chi, and a lot of different styles of karate. He studied judo for approximately 10 years before he met Tony Owen, who was the kata instructor at Spirit of Eagle Judo Camp. He has been a member of the US Sport Jujitsu Team from 1987 to 1990. And in that time, he won gold at the 1990 World Jujitsu Championships in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Really good competitor. He's qualified to compete in New York State's prestigious Empire State Games 7 times. In the 7 times, he took bronze 4 times as silver, and he won gold in both 2001 and 2008. So if you do the math, he's medaled lots of times, almost every time. Sensei Rommelmann has competed at the American-Can International Judo Challenge, taking 4 bronze, 2 silver, and the gold in 2006. Okay, so now we're getting into him spreading the word. He's run the Bushido Kai along with his kata partner, Jeff, I'm sorry if I pronounced this wrong, Giunta, for over 20 years.
Giunta.
Sorry, say it one more time, Sensei.
Giunta.
Giunta, for over 20 years. Bushido Kai Judo Club is one of Penfield Recreation's longest running and most successful programs. So that we're going to get into a bunch of the camps. He's also the co-director and instructor at the George Harris YMCA. What a surprise. Somebody who does judo does it at a YMCA. The International Judo Camp, New York, from 1995 until 2019. That's a good span. He's the kata instructor at the greatest camp on earth, North Carolina, from 2012 to 2019. He's been an instructor at the Spirit of Eagle International Judo Camp in Ohio from 1999 to 2008. He's been an instructor at the European Judo Camp in Odessa, Ukraine in 2009. He's also the co-developer of the ground defense tactics, which we were talking about, and that was taught and used by the Rochester Police Department defense tactics for almost 10 years. And a couple of thoughts I have as we've been talking is classical martial artist, right? Classical person talking about kata. Classical martial arts is about kata. He's not talking about exclusively sport judo, even though he's done sport judo. So I really love that. It's always, I know classical martial arts, if Sensei Rommelmann, we're going to have a good chat. Because if you're a classical martial artist, then at your core, you're classical. It doesn't matter if you do karate, Iaido, judo, jujitsu, we're going to have a good chat because we all come at it from that mindset, that classical mindset. The other thing I want to share with everybody is when you go through that list of camps and how many decades you've been teaching them, it's really clear that you're passionate about spreading the word to people as well. It's not just something for you while you're benefiting from it. I really like the fact that you're spreading it around as much as you possibly can. And yeah, I'm excited to get into this conversation with you. And thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's a honor and a pleasure. So.
Well, let's jump right in then, Sensei. So as I like to ask all our guests, what was it like for you growing up and what brought you into your first club or dojo?
So my first club, it's very interesting how I got into it. There was a Burger King in the village of Webster, and there was a box there, and your choices were judo or karate. And it said win free lessons for a month. And I went up and I want to take karate lessons. And I was going to sign up. And my friend said, we should sign up for judo. And I said, why would we pick judo? We want to do karate. And he goes, everybody's going to pick karate, but not everyone's going to pick judo. And judo is deadlier. And so sign me up for that right now. I'm going to take that one. And we signed up and I ended up being the winner that won the month. But the way it actually worked was everybody who signed up won a free week. And so my buddy ended up taking the class with me and he ended up actually signing up. And I think he ended up dropping out after he got his yellow belt. But I ended up sticking with it and went right through. So
your buddy gave you bad advice and he's a quitter. I just
So what kept you there? And at what point did you know you were never leaving the martial arts?
Wow. So I think after, well, I think when you get your yellow belt, that's a huge jump. That's your first rank that you get, you know, that's important. I think after that, when I ended up getting my green belt, you know, I couldn't imagine that I would get my black belt. But then probably 3-4 years down the road, I ended up getting my black belt in Toide. And probably about a year after that, I got my black belt in judo. And I just always thought, you know, I'm going to stick with this and I'm going to see it through. And, you know, when you're young, that black belt, that's the ultimate goal. But by the time you get it, you realize that, you know, that black belt isn't the ultimate goal. It's not the end. In fact, it's just the beginning. You're just starting to learn at that point.
And how many years had you been studying by the time that came to pass?
I'd say probably 4, maybe 5 years when I got my black belt in judo.
Yep.
I think I might have gotten my black belt in jiu-jitsu a little sooner because I had made the US team for jiu-jitsu, and I had fought in a few tournaments that required you had to be a black belt to fight in it. And since I qualified, you know, right away you get promoted. So. Sure.
So talk to us, like, what age are you? What's involved in making that team? Like, that's so significant, you know, and were you surprised that you were this good? I mean, you know, one of my coaches talks a lot about most of us are in the 97%. You'd know if you were a 3%er by now. And it sounds like pretty early on, if you're making national team, you know that you're really good at this.
So I was, I think I was about 17, and I had entered, it was the American Jiu-Jitsu Association used to have a championship, and I had entered it, and it was probably about a year before I ended up making the team. In fact, it was a year before I made the team. And I went out and basically you demonstrated self-defense. Someone attacked you and you demonstrated self-defense. And I took last place. And I did really good to start, and I ended up in last place. And I said to myself, I am going to study for a year. I'm going to train hard and study. And when this tournament comes around next year, I'm going to win the tournament. And a year went by, and I did end up winning the tournament. I ended up in the self-defense category. I ended up taking first place with a perfect score. I was invited to the Northern Region Championship. I believe it was the Northern Region. And I went there, and I got to play. The tournament was the USA versus Great Britain. And that was my first time I was on the US team. I was 18 years old. I was in high school, and I fought against a guy from England he was a lightweight, and he was phenomenal. And he was just really good. But we fought under Great Britain's rules, which we really didn't know. And I was actually the only one that took gold at that tournament. And it was a big deal that because you took gold or you took silver. And I ended up beating him somehow. I just got lucky and beat him. And then this pushed me a little more to train harder, because now I just fought on the team. I could continue this, and I did.
I think this is a great chance to break open just a little something for Around the Horn, which is, how important is winning to keep you motivated, and how important is losing to keep you motivated? Because, not everybody wins undefeated all the way through. So what keeps you from quitting, and how important are those goals?
I think when I was young, I think it was important. It was important that I win, that was something, but now, as I got older and I did a lot more studying and you know, I'm playing, basically I'm against myself. You know, when you go out there, you're not really against that other person, you're against yourself. And I think if you look at Roddy Ferguson wrote something and he goes, losing sucks, but it's so good for you. And if you read the article, he talks about how many people take the tournament or the match that they won and they analyze it, compared to if you lose, you analyze what you did to make sure that you don't do that again.
Right on. Sensei Dolphin, I want to jump over to you since we went with you last time. How important is that goal to keep you motivated, and how important is the loss to keep you motivated?
You know, when you start competed a lot, it's about you, right? Like you're like, okay, you're trying to prove something to yourself, I think, right? Then, like, I'd say in my last 6 years of competing, it was less about proving something to myself and more about representing my club, my country, and showing that the martial arts that we're doing in Legacy Shodan and the martial arts that we're doing in Canada, it stands up on a world stage. And I've never been prouder to like win international events and Canadian championships and have Sensei Legacy there. And people recognize that Legacy Shodan and Canadian karate is like on that level, on that par, right? So to speak to your losses, I mean, yeah, you're always going to learn more from your losses. I went on a 6-year tear where I never lost a fight other than disqualification. And sometimes the disqualifications were on purpose. Like it wasn't accidental that I was disqualified, like it was deliberate. But having said that, like one where a person beat me like fair and square in the Canadian Championships, he beat me 5-3. And Sensei Legacy, I remember getting in the back seat of his car and we were driving and he said, I'd ball you out and tell you something, but there's nothing I can say that's going to make you feel worse than you're feeling right now. So, which was true. And then later we just went back to the dojo. He gave me some simple tips, which I implemented and I avenged that loss. I ended up, the next time I fought that person, the score was 5-1 and I got all the points because I got my 5 points and he got 1 penalty point for something that I did to him. So he got no points. I gave him his 1 point and I got my other 5 points and I won. And, you know, had I not lost, I don't know how I would have handled that next fight. The next fight was more important fight. Yeah. Right. The next fight was a more important fight. The first fight was in the Canadian Championships. The next fight was an international championship. Right. I won the second fight. That was the more important fight.
Right on. Hanshi Legacy, how important are the goals to keep you motivated? How important are the losses?
If you're in a sport, losses aren't good. They break you down. Say you lose all the time. You shouldn't be in AAA. You might not even should be in AA. You should be in A. It sort of classifies you, right? You're in the wrong place. So if it's a sport, that's the way it is. If you're fighting other people or you're having small tournaments and stuff, and you're trying to improve your fighting, losing once in a while is good. It shows a character where you're going to dig down a little bit deeper and come out of it, as opposed to winning all the time and thinking you're a big shot. So, like that fight that you lost, you had a bad day. I always say, look, Ali lost the fight. And if you can handle that, then you understand what I'm saying. Ali lost the fight. Not everybody's on every day. You know, the fastest runner sometimes falls down. So there's a lot of different angles you can look at winning and losing.
Thanks, Hanshi. Sensei Suino, I saw your face particularly light up at the idea of motivation from goals, motivation from losses.
Yeah. I don't know how much I can speak to that in tournaments. You know, I've had my ass kicked in dojos, in judo dojos many, many times. But the tournaments I've been in, I've always done pretty well in as a kid. But I competed in Iaido as an adult. And honestly, I was just so focused on making sure my teacher was proud of me that the consequence, I didn't care at all about whether I happened to win, but that was not on my radar. I was just trying to work really, really hard to make sure I did what my teacher wanted me to do. But what's interesting to me about it is winning on that stage, on the biggest Iaido stage in the world for 4 consecutive years, taught me something about myself, that I could go anywhere and compete against anybody in the world, right? So I might have thought that and somewhere in my fantasy head, but when I went and did it, I realized that, you know, whatever I want to do, I'm just as, you know, I mean, obviously there's some things I'm sure I suck at, but the things that I'm good at, I should have no fear about stepping on big stages.
Right
That's what it taught me. Yeah.
And then we have a question from Mark Altamar, who we love when he sends in his stuff. Sensei Dauphin, do you have that up? I don't have it here. Do you want to read that question?
Sure. So Sensei Altamar says, listening to early years stories, it seems like Sensei R had a similar focus from an early age. I'm curious if he was interested, involved, tempted to pursue other sports.
Oh, if I had not.
Did you play football? Did you run track? Did you want to? Did you think about it? Like,
I did run track for part of a season. And that was about the only one I ever did. I ran track for part of a season. I was interested in martial arts, and once I got into it, that's all I did. Shoot, in high school, I went to 2 dances. I went to the one when I got to high school, when the meet and greet dance, and I went to my senior ball. Those were the only 2 I went to. I never went to I think I went to 1 football game my senior year because a couple of friends from school invited me, and I went to a minor league baseball game once, and really all, you know, the guys that I hung out with were all they all did stuff at the dojo.
So we've talked about this on other episodes, so we won't go around the horn on this, but I'd really love for you to crack open sacrifice, what that sacrifice is, because you're effectively saying, I'm not going to be like the other kids, and I'm not going to do what the other kids do, and I'm not going to do it with them. And was that a sacrifice, or was it just innate? When you look back, I mean, where do you want to go with that?
Oh man, I understand that it is a sacrifice, but it was something that I liked doing. It was something that I enjoyed doing. And yeah, there are days when the training is not good, and you know, it's hard to do, but I always loved it. And I even think, you know, sometimes I think of my students, and they say, oh, I'm working so hard. And I think, like, when my kata partner and I really started training in kata, we would get up at 2 a.m. and drive from New York to Ohio to train with our teacher. And so we would get there, and if we were early, we would sleep in the car until he got there and opened the dojo. And then we would train for maybe 3-4 hours. We would have lunch or dinner with him, and we would drive back to New York. And I think, like, you know, that's a lot of sacrifice that we made. And I was fortunate because it's not just he and I making the sacrifice, but our families are making the sacrifice of not seeing us too. But then, you know, you hear people go like, oh, I'm training so hard. And I always think, like, are you training so hard, or can you put a little bit more into it? And I mean, it is sacrifice, but like I said, I love every minute of it.
I'm going to throw it
And
yeah.
Another thing along that line, I had a student once who said, she said that she wasn't going to, she had qualified to go to Worlds, and it was in Japan, and Jeff and I had qualified, and she and her partner had qualified, and she was in college at the time. And she says, I have this huge physics exam. I have work. I have school. I have all of this stuff going on. She goes, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it to Worlds. And I said, I looked at her and I said, you can make it. You can do all of this, and you need to sacrifice and make sure that you make it. Because if you don't do it, you will always sit and think about that and say, I made that, but I didn't do it. And she ended up making it to Worlds and did everything she had to do, and got up there on the big stage, and they got out there and did their kata, and it was beautiful. I remember telling her, I said, you know, a couple months ago, you told me you weren't going to be able to do this, but she did it.
It's fantastic. I was just going to say, you know, we're not really going to go around the horn, but Sensei Dauphin, when we were interviewing him for the show, I asked him, I said, you know, you've got time limits, you've got body limits, like how much should you train? And I just remember he said, all of it, do all the training. And when you just said, like, are you training? Like, are you training that hard? I really like that. Like, I like the constant questioning. Like, can you do more? Are you doing more? Or is it an excuse? And I like the way you said that. So I want to talk about your journey to meeting Sensei Tony Oed. And I also really want to touch on, you know, what you've got up on your site about his way of teaching kata, making it interesting, fun, beautiful, challenging. And what was the significance of that based on, compared to what you were doing, and talk about your journey with him.
So when we met him, I had paid to go to Spirit of the Eagle training camp. And so did Jeff Giunta. He was training at my club at the time. He was one of my students. And the week before the camp was the Empire State Games. And I had qualified to play in them, and I got thrown. And when I got thrown, the person landed, I landed on one shoulder, and the guy who threw me landed on the other. And my shoulders came together, and I popped my clavicle. And I couldn't lift my arm. I couldn't do anything. And I called the camp, and I said, you know, I'm injured. I have a doctor's note. You know, I'd like my money back. And they said, no, there's no refunds for camp. And so I decided to myself, I'm going to go to this camp, but what I'm going to do is I am going to relax the whole time. I'm going to have a good time every night with my friends. I'm going to drink a beer every night. You know, I can't really train the way I was used to, that, you know, constant throw. And I got to camp, and Jeff had ended up, I think he ended up breaking a finger. There was something wrong with his hand. And we were sitting talking one day, and somebody came over. It was right at the beginning of camp. And they said, you know, instead of you two sitting here, you should go take Tony Oed's class over there, the kata class. They said, you'll like him. He's interesting. He does a great job with the kata class, and you should go over and take his class. You need it for your next rank anyways. And I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, you know, we should do that. So we decide that we're going to show up to his class, you know, 15 minutes early, get stretched out. We'll be ready for his class right after lunch, you know. And lunchtime came. We went back to the room to relax a little bit. Time to be there early, and we get there, and he already has class going. He, you know, even though the schedule said it started at one time, he started a half hour early. So we're late. And I was always taught, you sit in Seiza on the side of the mat, and you wait to be invited onto the mat. Mm-hmm. And so Jeff and I sat there, and he was teaching. And while he was teaching, I was watching everything that he did, watching what he was teaching. And he would teach the technique, and then he would come over and look at us. and he never invited us onto the mat. He just would look and then go over and keep teaching. And finally, he came to the end of the kata. I believe it was Itsutsu no kata that he was teaching. And it was the last technique. And he said, are you waiting? I think he said something like, are you waiting to show us your beautiful technique? And I said, no, Sensei, we were late for class. We're waiting to get bowed onto the mat. And he says, please join us. Everybody's going to do the kata once, and then everybody's going to show me. And so we got to practice Itsutsu no kata one time. And he said, okay, who wants to show me first? And the first guys to jump up and get out there were Al Panacchia and Mark Pasquinelli. So, yeah. So they got out there, they did the kata, and he critiqued it and said what they did. And he said, okay, who's going to go next? And I raised my hand, we'll go next. And he said, what's going to be tough is that the first guys can make all the mistakes they want. The second guys cannot make those mistakes. Mm-hmm. So we did the kata. I did have to cheat a little bit. I read off the blackboard because he had all the techniques written down, numbered, and what the attacks were. And we got done, and he said, how long have you been studying kata? And I said, I went like this to say 2, and he goes, 2 years. And I said, no, 2 times. And it was almost the end of the class at this point. And he said something very, very profound at that point. He says, everybody sat down. And he said, if 2 guys were to go and study kata and really study it, and he says, read the books, watch videos, go to clinics, find instructors, and really practice, they could be the next national champions. And then he bowed out. And Jeff and I went back to our room, and we were like, he was talking about us. He meant that we could go to nationals and be the next national champions. And maybe 10 years later, we were at Miss Fukuda's tournament in California, and he was there, and Al Panacchia was there, and Sensei Tony, he had all of his team there. He had girls and guys that all did kata. And we went out to this fancy Italian restaurant, and there was dancing, and the guys had gotten up to go dance with the girls. And Jeff and I were sitting there with Sensei Tony. And I said, Sensei, you said something to us years ago, and we really took it to heart. And what you said was, if 2 guys were to study this kata, they could be the next national champions. And that is why we studied so hard, because we knew you were talking about us. And he says, I wasn't talking about you. He goes, he says, I'm talking about anybody, any 2 people that were to really study this kata and learn it and read the books and watch the videos and train in it and find the right teachers and go to the right clinics, they could be the next national champions. You just listened to what I said. And it was very funny to us that he did it. And that's actually when Jeff and I teach a clinic, we end every clinic with that story, because it's important for people to know that anybody can do this. You just have to study and work at it. And I think that's isn't that martial arts? Is working hard and training like that.
I think so. Sensei Dauphin, I want to throw it to you, because you always say something lately about whoever walks in the door could be what?
The best martial artist the world's ever seen.
Yeah.
You started saying that about a year ago. And
yeah, but Sensei Legacy said that for about 48 years. So
there you go. So that's something that someone's going to hear, right? Like you heard that. You have students who are going to hear that, and they're going to think you mean them. I have a student right now, and, I think they think of themselves when I say that and go, wow, could I? Maybe. And then they train harder. And I love the idea of the lesson that you think is for you, and it is, but it's for everybody. You just heard it. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Sensei Suino, you got any like that? You got any little, ones you throw out that you've seen people pick up as though it was for them?
Well, just when Sensei Rommelmann was talking about that whole experience, it reminded me of something I say to my students all the time who are professional comers to class and not professional tournament goers. I keep telling them, listen, I've got kata people that can walk in and win states or regionals with 3 weeks of practice. And for some reason, very few of them do. So maybe it's a different problem. I mean, our guys love training at the dojo. It's hard to get them to go out and compete, but yet when they do, one of the gentlemen on this call, Daniel J. Holland III, and Sensei Steve Morris, a few years ago, went out to, the nationals and medaled in 3 kata, won first place in at least one of them. When they finally listened to me, of course, they do all the work. It's not right. It's not me doing the work. They do all the work. But I just believe, as Sensei Rommelmann does, and as Sensei Oa did, that anybody with in the top 1/3 of the distribution of talent who works really, really hard, who busts their ass and studies and has a sincere desire to work can rise to the top. And I think most people don't truly believe that about themselves.
Well, and to me, that tournament idea you're talking about, Sensei Suino, again, the term's probably been around not just from you, but I first heard from you the term pressure testing. Mm-hmm. And I know that's a big tenet of yours. And I know even in my own martial arts journey, when it was my turn to do the 10 questions, like I want to compete as much as possible in my next 5 years because I want to pressure test it, not just know it, but know how to do it in application against another. And when I hear you talking about those people who with 3 weeks of study, the choice is to pressure test it, not just to know it in the class.
Yeah. And to, I mean, I'll just speak to the judo world, but I think it's true of all martial arts. How do you spend 20 years in judo and go to 3 tournaments? It just doesn't make any sense to me that you would be content with that. Not because you're trying to win a ton of medals or prove yourself to anyone other than yourself. Like it's the best you can get unless you decide to go out and go pick fights on the street and use your judo against those people. But you need to pressure test it. I struggle with that myself as I age because I can't train as hard as I used to, but I believe that I have an obligation to be subjected to other judo players who are trying to throw me just as like I'm trying to throw them. Otherwise, my judo becomes effete, right? And I'm not talking from a place of authenticity. So yeah, whatever form that pressure testing comes, whether it's really hard fights in the dojo, whether it's tournaments, or God forbid, street fights, I think it only helps you understand yourself and your martial art better.
Hey, listen, Ben, it's 2 things. The pressure testing thing, good. Yeah. In the dojo, in the street. Yes. In tournaments. Yes. Sensei Suino has other maxims that he likes to say in class that I always take to mean he's talking about me. Your Sayaban already sucks. Everybody, your Tanayuchi is not good. You don't have your sword in your belt properly. These are things and one thing that I will say about that, and I don't know if we want to talk about this, but the closer you get to somebody, the more they feel they can be direct with you about things like that, right? Like Sensei Suino, Sensei Legacy, I have a close enough relationship with them that it won't damage the relationship when they say, look, you just got to do this better. Like, you're not doing it good. It's not good. It sucks. And I bet you Sensei Rommelmann has had relationships with people like that, where they were really direct with him about what he needed to do and how to make it better.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So talk to us a bit about that, who that might have been with, or if you don't want to be specific, like what's the benefit and what's the limit of it?
Sure. So actually, I have 2 stories. One is when we were first starting doing kata, we were really getting into Nage no kata. we were at Sensei Tony's dojo, and we were doing Nage no Kata, and we were on Uchimata, and Jeff must have thrown, so I'm uke during Nage no Kata. He must have thrown me at 90 was when I stopped counting the throws. And he's like, every throw, so at one point, Sensei Tony had sent us aside with, I think Frances Glaze was who he had sent us aside with. And she's like, do it again, do it again, do it again. And he's like, every throw, sorry. And I'm counting. And when I got to 90 is when I stopped counting. And so I have to assume it was over 100 throws that he had done. And finally, we were just starting, she was like, okay, you're starting to understand it. You're starting to get it a little better. But yeah, she was just, it was relentless. Do it again, do it again, do it again. And yeah, so that's one of them. Being thrown that many times, it was pretty rough. But I have another where we were actually at Miss Fukuda's dojo. And Miss Fukuda said at one point, Jeff and I were practicing, and she says, you can put your gis back on, or you can put your clothes back on, take off your gis, put your clothes back on. I can't teach you. And luckily, Sensei Tony was there, and he said to Miss Fukuda, he says, Miss Fukuda, these are my students, and they will work very, very hard to learn what you're doing. He goes, and I will help them personally here at the dojo to make sure that they work hard. And she says, for you, Tony, I'll let them stay. And that was so harsh. That was so harsh to be told, like, yeah, I can't teach you. You guys aren't good enough. And I think the next year we came back, and whatever kata they were demonstrating, they kept having us come out and demonstrate it. And everything we did was horrible. They were like, no, do this. No, why are you doing it like that? And I remember leaving the dojo, and I was right on the edge. Like I was going to cry. Like, they keep calling us up, and we can't do it right. What's our problem? And I had said something, and I want to say maybe it was Al or maybe it was Mark that said it. And they said, they call you up to demonstrate because you're doing well and they want to help you. And I go, if we're doing so well, how come they're saying we're doing everything wrong? And I've taken that to heart over the years, that when we go someplace, if somebody asks me to demonstrate, I do it the best I can. And even if I do it wrong, and they tell me, I try and do it better again the next time, and better the next time. And that's training, right?
Sensei Suino.
That's amazing. Your 90 or 100 throws just reminded me of when pressure testing. When I was in Tokyo with Gage Sensei, and we used to get together on Saturdays and train. We would go months and months and months and practicing Nage no Kata together. And then one summer we decided we were going to do 10,000 uchikomis. We each picked three techniques, and it was 9 uchikomis, 1 throw, 9 uchikomis, 1 throw, right? And I was doing harai tsurikomiyashi, right? Among my throws, harai goshi, which became my specialty, and I can't remember the third one. He was working on taiyatoshi, and he was doing a taiyatoshi where he would take the collar hand and he would finish taiyatoshi with his fist on the floor, right? So he'd throw me all the way to the floor. And I remember we were almost to the 10,000. The goal was to get to 10,000 uchikomis and then drink, it took 3 months to get there. And after training, he threw me particularly hard one time. And after training, I go, man, I'm not feeling so well. So later that day, I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, have you always had this heart arrhythmia? And so I think that I got slammed on the mat. I don't know, maybe Sensei Rommelmann, you might not be as healthy as you were before those 90 Uchimata throws, but that's a brutal number of falls to take. I got to tell you.
But he always, when we tell that story, he always goes, buddy, it was a spring-loaded floor. The floor couldn't have been that hard. And I'm like, it's still 100 falls.
Right. Oh my God.
Sensei, it's time for your 10 questions. The 10 questions we ask all our guests, and our request is you answer as impulsively as you can, but then feel free to expand on your answer as you wish. What is the most effective move in your martial arts arsenal?
In mine is right now it's sumigeish. But when I was young, it was seotoshi was my go-to throw. That was the one that I used. But as I got older, I just couldn't. I don't squat as well as I used to. I'm not as strong as I used to be. So I ended up switching, and I ended up hitting sumigeish, and yeah, that's the one I go to all the time. It's actually a 2-on-1, and shoot the sumigeish.
Who is the most influential martial artist in your life?
Ooh, that has to be, well, oh, that's a tough one. It has to be Tony Owed. It has to be, because with everything that he did to help teach us, and right down to even, he would take the camp, and if he was teaching Nage no Kata at camp, but he knew that we already knew it, he would take his time to teach us whatever the next kata was that we needed. So he did one summer where they were working on, I want to say we were working on maybe Kodokan Goshin Jitsu, and he took his free time and he worked on Koshiki no Kata the entire time with us, and it was just so nice that he would do stuff like that for us.
Who do you think is the most influential martial artist of all time, and why?
Ooh, Bruce, it's got to be Bruce Lee. Just because he's the big one. He's the one that everybody knows. Yeah, I mean, I personally, I like Jackie Chan better. I think Jackie Chan shows martial arts better, while Bruce Lee was always fighting. If you watch Jackie Chan, his first line of defense is always to run away.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you get there?
Ippon?
What excites you most about the next 5 years of your training?
Well, that's tough to say too, because I am getting older, and I mean I'm looking at different ways of teaching right now. Is really what I'm trying to do when I'm at the dojo. When I teach, I'm trying to show what is the softest way I can teach whatever the technique is that I'm working on, and it's actually very interesting to me. I actually ran into somebody at a judo camp last week, and he was teaching very soft style, like this is an easy way to teach this. And I ended up talking to him afterwards, because I said, I am doing the exact same thing, but I never thought of the techniques that he was teaching. So to me, what's exciting is trying to find ways to teach all of these techniques that will make it simple for people when they see it.
Love that. You touched on this a little bit. Do you have a favorite film and television martial artist, even if they're not legit martial artists?
Oh, it's Jackie Chan.
Yeah. Do you have a martial artist, living or dead, in all of recorded history who you'd like to train with the most?
Ooh, I would really like, if I could train with Tony again, I would love that. That would be that would be my choice.
Right on. If everyone in the world could have the greatest benefit that you've gotten from martial arts, whether they train or not, what benefit would they be getting?
Oh, I think it's confidence. It's no, I'm going to take that back, because I think that the friendships that I've built over the years through judo, I think of all the friends when I go places, camps, tournaments, and I think of all the friendships and people who they call to check in, they call to say hi, and I just think that's a beautiful thing.
And our last two questions come as a pair. What is your greatest achievement and what is your greatest regret?
Greatest achievement. Well, greatest achievement in martial arts, I assume.
However you want to answer.
I think I have a beautiful family. I'm very fortunate that they've all three of my kids have done judo. My grandkids have done judo. My wife is super supportive of when I say I'm going to this tournament, I'm going to a training camp, I'm going to class. Never complains about it, and I just think I'm very fortunate that way. Yeah, so that has to be my greatest achievement there. My biggest regret. My son is studying exercise science at school, and I really wish when I was young that I was smart enough to think that somehow this is linked with judo, because to me it was no training. I just want to train. I don't want to study that stuff. But I watched my son and my son-in-law also studied exercise science at school, and I really wish that I would have done that. And when they come to class, they say, like, you're doing everything that we've studied, but I don't know the names of it. I don't know the terms of anything that they're talking about. I just know, like, this is what I do. And I wish that I would have gone to school. I think it's similar to cooking. So I worked in my sister-in-law has a restaurant. I worked there for years. And when I went to school to learn how to cook, all of a sudden I learned all the names. I learned why I'm doing things. And I wish that I would have gone to college and done that. And it would have been something that I'm interested in and I enjoyed doing.
Right on.
I was thinking your greatest regret was going to be when you were buying that Whopper that you should have checked a box for karate instead of judo. But
yeah, for karate.
We had a question come in from ZT, one of our friends of the show, and she's really great about providing some thought-provoking ideas. So her question for you is, you've studied a lot of martial arts, and when you think of all you've learned, do you apply the same concepts with all the techniques, or do you apply distinctly different concepts for different techniques?
So a lot of the karate that I've done, the punching and kicking martial arts were all very similar, and the grappling martial arts that I have done are all very similar. The sport jujitsu that I did was kind of a mixture of both. But yes, the concepts were basically very similar. Even now when I every once in a while I'll do a Brazilian jiu-jitsu clinic, go and take the clinic, or if I'm going somewhere to study, maybe it's a wrestling clinic or a sambo clinic. When I do it, the concepts are very similar. So yes, I have seen overlap in them.
That actually threads into a question that I have based on your answers to the 10 questions. You talked about, the next 5 years, you want to look at better ways to teach, and you want to look at a way to teach. I don't even know if you said this word, but the softest way, the simplest way, the easiest way. And we are going to go around the horn on this because every martial artist seems to end up here. what is it about time in the martial arts that makes you go, how do we make this gentler, easier, invisible, soft, etc.? Why is that the end game for everyone?
That's a great question. I mean, sometimes if I look at my techniques, like when I was young, I said Seotoshi was my technique. Seotoshi was the way I would enter for it was very hard. And I would put a lot of muscle into it to pull off the technique. And while as I got older, I think you get smarter and you get wiser. And I just started working on different techniques. And I wonder if some of it is, there's as you get older, there's muscle loss, things like that. But I'm thinking more along the lines of people who are coming into martial arts. When I teach them, I don't want them to take that hard hit into the ground right away, but I want them to be able to do judo. You have to throw somebody. I mean, in judo, everybody knows, when you say get a partner, nobody wants to work with the white belt. The white belt's going to drop you, right? So I'm trying to think of, like, when I'm in class, I try and think of, like, how can I teach them, for example, how can you teach them to do a seonage, a roll through seonage, a drop seonage? How can you teach them to be round when they hit? Because if you take that nice round seonage, the fall's not bad, and it's still a score. You still landed on your back, and so what I've been doing is I have the little kids, and they curl up into a ball, and the person stands over them on all fours, and they just reach up and grab the arm, and they do a somersault. And I've been trying to do things like that, just different ideas. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, I have done some where I'm like, let's try this, and it doesn't work, and I'm like, okay, scrap that. We're gonna go back and look at the technique again and try it a different way.
So we're going to go around the horn on this in sort of ascending age, because that makes sense to me. Sensei Dauphin, why does everything get softer over time?
I don't know, because you get better at it. You don't have to use as much muscle. But I mean, quite simply, right? I don't know. I remember standing with Sensei Legacy in front of a class once, and he said, "This is so fucking easy. Why can't these people do it?" And what they were trying to do is inside middle blocks. And today, I had a conversation about somebody, and yeah, it's just things are going full circle, right? I think, I don't know, like that's a really, like we could probably do a whole topic on that, Sean, right? Like too much muscle, not enough muscle, like whatever. But to answer your question specifically, I think you get softer because you just don't need to be as hard anymore to get the same result, right? And actually, it's actually probably the softer you get, the better result you actually get. Like, when you're harder, like, I don't know if the 25-year-old Randy hit you with a reverse punch in the body, or the 52-year-old Randy hit you in the reverse punch in the body. I would suggest you go to the 25-year-old and ask him to punch you. And I don't feel like I hit like with as much muscle anymore at all. So
I've been hit by both, and I agree 1,000%. And the 25-year-old hurt, but anyways, Sensei Suino?
Yes to aging and trying to find ways that hurt yourself less as you get older. Yes to you get better, so you don't need as much, but also maybe this is peculiar to the throwing arts. There's this return on investment thing that happens when you're really good and you're really soft. You put in like a 1 out of 10 effort, and you get 100 response out, and that is so gratifying. It just makes you want to find that again and again. Sensei Rommelmann, I know you've had this, in Randori, when you're just firing just right. and I know sometimes my worst times in my personal life, when I'm so distracted and despondent, I go on the mat. For some reason, that creates the right circumstances to go out there and just slay people, almost like I don't care. And that is when you think back on it, you're like, that was amazing. I was trying so little muscular wise, and I was getting this giant result out. So now that becomes something to proceed to chase, right? To try to reproduce that. And that almost feels like magic. And so for me, that's kind of the third leg of that stool, is I want to do that. I love the feeling of making a tiny motion with hardly any effort and having the training partner just fly away. It's a cool thing.
Minimal effort with maximum efficiency.
Who said that before?
Yeah.
Sensei Sweeto, it's not quite the same thing, but it's almost like, even if you're not the best golfer in the world, on like hole 16 or 17, everybody has what's called the comeback shot, where you just nail a nice drive and now you know you're coming back.
Listen, Sean, I'm a recovering golfaholic. This is a bad analogy. You're gonna. I'm starting to get the shakes as you're talking.
and then you just pull out that nice P wedge.
Stop.
You just lay it up nice and soft. See, why does everything get softer as you get better and older in the martial arts?
Well, on my board in front of when the students all come and stand around when I do lessons, it says the power of softness. And that's really learning to not contract your muscles while you're firing. That's why you use your hip so that it runs through. It's very much like a paddle ball. You know, paddle ball, I think that's what it's called, with an elastic on it. You know, the kids play with it. You can hit it as hard as you want, then it starts to slow down. That's because it has resistance. And if you throw a punch with your hand closed tight, your arm is tight. Nothing goes through that. But if you hit the same ball with no string attached, there's no resistance, or like firing a bullet. It's the speed that does the damage, not the muscles. It's a delivery. So we're all in the same ballpark. The power of softness. I had a sensei who, when I first met him, he was teaching a seminar, and I made a wisecrack, and he said, his name is Benny Allen. He said, "You come up here," and he did this. He hit me on the chest. The bottom of my pants went poof. My ass hit the ground behind my heels. My feet rolled up, and I stood up, and I learned the lesson of my life. Right there. It's a resistance. People try too hard sometimes.
I want to come back to you, Sensei. You have studied a lot of other martial arts, so I just want to talk to you about your journey with the center line, but trying other things like the Aiki-jujitsu and the karate and the different things, especially the Iaido. So what is that for you, and how do you stay centered in a martial art when trying all the other ones?
So some of it was just the fact that I had different teachers that you know, you didn't just do judo, you didn't just do jujitsu, you did karate with it, you did so you did Shodan. That was what they were studying. You do Shodan at this club. That's the way it is. That's how I ended up doing Iaido. I was actually at a Kyokushinkai club, and that was part of their program. They would, one night would be Kyokushinkai, the next night they had Iaido, and then I had a night where I did jujitsu classes there. And so a lot of it was just like, oh, you know, I'd like to learn about what does this martial art do? What is their main focus? And so I've been fortunate, you know, to try and do these other martial arts.
Right on. And
so, but to me, so I don't know, this, you know, this is a preference. To me, sometimes I've taken arts where, and this could be because I'm still a beginner at it. I don't really understand it because I'm like, oh, so for example, Shodan, I had no interest when I was young, when I was doing it, because I was just punching air. I punched air the entire time. And what interested me in judo was that whatever they taught me, I got to do that night. And I got to try it on someone that you know, they're going to resist. They're going to try not to get thrown, but I'm going to get to try and do it. And then, you know, as I studied more and more, I realized like, oh, they're going to let me try my Shotokan karate, but, you know, I just had to stick with it more. So.
Right on. And, you know, I was just actually messaging senseis, like, I can't believe we're almost winding down, but we're not there yet. And I want to ask you about your camps.
Oh, so I went to, it was called the YMCA International Judo Camp. And so that was the original name. It's run about almost 50 years. In fact, this year would have been the 50th year. But we ended up making it the International Judo Camp instead of the YMCA ended up closing down where the camp was. We call it the International Judo Camp. We have a new location in Bloomingburg, New York. It was a beautiful location, had a pond, a pool, basketball courts, tennis courts. It had a spot for the dojo. And yeah, I've been going for probably close to 25, maybe 30 years that I've been going there. And yeah, I went from being a counselor at the camp where I watched kids to being the head counselor at the camp to being the guy who did the schedule and found out who was teaching each night, to being the kata instructor, to being the kata instructor and the co-director. And we had a great time. We held it August 20th through the 26th. And we already have the dates for next year. So if you're interested, if you Google International Judo Camp in Bloomingburg, we'll have the information up real soon, but you can see this year's.
Right on. And yep. Are you kicking in, Sensei Suino?
No. I was just, it sounds great, man. I got to look into it a little bit more.
Yeah, it was a great time. And so this was our first year back since COVID. We had a bunch of problems after the Y shut down. We tried to get the same campgrounds that were our original campgrounds for 49 years, and ended up we couldn't do it, and so then we ended up scrambling and finding this camp, and it's beautiful. It's out in the woods, no TV, no cell phones. You can use your cell phones in certain areas, but you have to find them on the campgrounds. It's just nice to get away from it all and train.
Right on. And, you know, we built this show during COVID, and, you know, it can feel like it's over, but it's really nice to hear you remind us that this is the first year back. And, you know, we just want to help you spread that word that, you know, some things were affected and still are. And, you know, for anybody in that neighborhood or that area, you know, make this a like, fuck you, COVID, you know, we're going to help this camp out. Because we'd like to see that get back to those numbers that you had.
That would be awesome. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I went to the camp, and I remember years where there were 200 people on the mat, and it was just beautiful. And so this actually links into something you were saying earlier about, you know, thinking about what rank you would ever attain, you know, how did you know you were going to stick with it? So I was already a black belt when I really started going back to the camp. And I remember being at the very end of the line and looking up, and these guys, the red and white belts, those were my heroes. And I would watch them get out there and they would teach. And it was just a thing that I was like, oh man, you know, they're so great. I wish that, you know, maybe someday. And yeah, it's beautiful because I remember every time I get a little bit closer. And now I'm one of the guys helping run the camp and everything. So it's really beautiful.
That's awesome. Sensei Dauphin, did you want to chip in there at all? Did you?
Yeah, just I'm happy that camp's coming back. You know, Camp Bushi's come back. Our martial arts tournament came back. The Matsumore Challenge. So it's Copeland's martial arts tournament. The Windsor Open. Yeah, it's a time for us to rebuild, right? Martial arts has been knocked down before, Meiji Restoration, World War II, but it comes back. It always comes back, and people like us are going to make it come back.
I love that. And there's an evolutionary concept called the bottleneck, where not everybody makes it through, but the ones who do are the ones who are going to, for the next gen, create a stronger version of what was there before. You know, a culling of the dead weight, so to speak. I'm really excited for you too. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you to our PKCC crew: Robert Schlumsky, Justin Shea, Andrei Sedeshev, Alden Adair, Jesse Villevitao, Sydney Dauphin, Josh Kitchens, Cristiano Landel, Daniel J. Holland, Dridi Giuliani, and Stavros Stavroulias. They run this show behind the scenes. Everything you know about the show comes from what they help put out. And the reason this works technically, we're so grateful for them. And we want you to join us next week, because our guest on September 7th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is going to be Sensei Steve Uslis. And we're really excited to have him, and we're really excited to have you with us then. And we're going to go around the horn now and talk about our time with you, Sensei Rommelmann. Hanshi Legacy, what do you want to say?
Well, I don't know much about the judo art. I mean, as a matter of fact, I don't know anything. But what I did notice is that you have good work ethics, and that you're always looking to discover. And those are good qualities in a martial artist. And I'd like to thank you for coming on our show.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Hanshi. Sensei Suino?
Man, love the conversation. You know, maybe it's unfair just because the names and the techniques are things that I'm really familiar with, but it was super fun to hear you talk about Tony Oed, about Big Al, about Glaze Sensei, about Fukuda Sensei, people I know and or I have admired for a long time, and some of the technique names that you shared with me that we of course know, but probably had to explain for the audience. Great visit, man. It's nice to know you're out there in Rochester. I don't think that's all that far from Ann Arbor, Michigan. So you're welcome to come visit, get on our mats, which are sprung. You'll be happy to hear. Or I'd love to come out to Rochester one of these days. I will take away something I did not know until today, and that is that judo is deadlier than karate.
You notice that only few people are laughing at that terrible joke.
Ask Tosu.
Right.
Sensei Dauphin.
It's spicy. Instantly, I like it.
Yeah, it's spicy. Why don't we start here?
Sensei Rommelmann, you started some spice between the hosts.
Film it. World Star.
I liked what we talked about kata, because that's something common for all of us. And I agreed with what you said about controlled breathing, mind, body. And it's not just the physical of what you see. And I think that's a really important, it's not just the physical of what other people see. It's something different, right? I really like that. I really like that a Burger King contest brought you into martial arts, right? Like makes you want to go get a Whopper today. But
yeah.
I also like that your last place finish drove you to become on the national team, international champion. That's a good lesson for everybody to take away from this show, that, failure isn't fatal if you use it the right way and you move forward. You were last, and then within a year you were first. That's not even a long amount of time, right? Like a year. That's not even a long amount of time. It resonated with me that you said that you would drive from New York, you'd get up at 2 a.m. and drive from New York to Ohio to do a 3-hour lesson and then drive home, right? It resonates with me because that's very similar. Sensei Suino lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I live up here near Toronto. If I want an Iaido lesson, that's where I got to go, right? I've said it many times on this show. I learned to fight by getting up at 5 a.m., driving to St. Thomas in a blizzard, in sunny weather, in a rainstorm, in whatever that might be, to show up, pick Sensei Legacy up and go get private lessons and fight. That's so you saying that really resonated for me. That's like a common bond that you and I have together. Also sitting in Seiza at the side of the room, waiting to be invited onto the mat. That's just common practice in this dojo. That should be common practice in all classical dojos, and good for you for spouting that lesson out for all eternity on this show. People shouldn't just walk onto the floor. If you just walk on the floor, you're making a mistake. You're disrupting the class. You're interrupting the instructor. You should just be patient and wait until they let you on. And if they don't, go home. Be there on time, even if you were 30 minutes early. I liked, Tony Owen. Clearly, whether you wanted to say it or not, he is the most influential martial artist in your life. Bruce Lee, Sensei Legacy said that. That's the most popular answer and probably therefore the most correct answer. God, you're the first one to say Ippon, right? That's a good answer. I like that one. And I also like when you said that who you want to train with all time. And you said, I'd like to train with Tony Owen again. If I could train with him one more time, that would be great. That's a good compliment for him. And, nobody has said this yet, but it really resonated with me. This show is a living testament to it. Greatest benefit is friendship. Like, I think it even actually probably goes beyond that, right? Like, people on this show for me they're not like friends, they're family. Like, they call, I come. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm excited to hear from them. When the call comes, I pick up the phone every time, and that is you get your tribe, and that's a great thing about martial arts. I agree with you 100%. And then the last thing you said that really resonated with me was you said you stood there and the red and white belts were your heroes, right? I think very similar to a lot of us, like anybody on the call, like Sensei Legacy, Sensei Suino, Benson, like we all looked at those people before us and we're like, my God, if I could just be like a shadow of what those people actually are, I'll have done something good in my life. And now other people look to you for that, Sensei Rommelmann. And so thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed this. The time flew by. I really, really liked it. I don't know you, never met you, but I hope I do. I don't do judo too much, but I'd happily do some judo with you if that's what you want to do.
No, thank you.
We're going to go to you for the last word, but I just want to add quickly because I get to sort of guide the whole chat, so I don't say too much at the end. But, when you said that the one person you'd want to train with is Tony Owen, like so many of us, of course, we'd love to meet Miyamoto Musashi. And of course, but really, we just want more time with the people we know, and when you said that, I really felt connected in that way. I just wish I had more time with my senseis in person, not someone I've never met. And then when you talked about just that softest concept, I really appreciated that. I'm even going to go to my training this weekend and just think that little bit differently about that, because you stimulated that chat. So anytime a guest comes in and now I'm going to go train differently, like next time I'm in the room, I always feel like that's such a huge win for me. But we've revamped our format. So the last word is going to go to you, and then we'll say goodnight.
Anything
you want to go out on.
Okay, I think it's important to train hard and enjoy what you're doing. So train hard and enjoy.
Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, we're so glad you're with us. Good night. We'll see you next week. Be safe. And thank you so much, senseis, and for our guest, Sensei Rommelmann.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Right, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.